I was halfway through rewinding my Men at Work cassette on my bright yellow Sony Walkman Sports when the smell of Mrs. Kowalski's overcooked meatloaf drifted through my bedroom window. Not just the smell, but the whole cloud of it, thick enough to make me picture her in that floral apron she wore all year, banging pans around in her tiny kitchen. Our houses were so close you could practically borrow a cup of sugar without opening the front door, and every smell, every argument, every burst of her TV laughter drifted right through the gap between our driveways. The late afternoon sun came in sideways through my blinds, making those little golden dust specks float in slow motion. It bounced off the hood of Ricky Palmer's fire-red '78 Camaro parked across the street, the one with the mismatched front fender because he'd tapped a mailbox the month before. That Camaro was the pride of the block. Ricky had a Pioneer stereo in it that could rattle your ribs if he turned it past halfway, and he never missed a chance to crank Don't Stop Believin' when he drove by. In my room, the fan was on low, one of those old General Electric jobs with the heavy metal grill and a hum that wobbled every few seconds like it was thinking about quitting. On the desk, next to my stack of spiral notebooks and the Polaroid of me and my buddy Tony at the roller rink, was a sweating glass bottle of Tab. The fizz was fading, but I liked it flat, somehow made the taste sharper. Mom hated that I drank so much of it, said it would rot my insides, but she still bought it for me when it was on sale at the Piggly Wiggly. The radio in the kitchen was tuned to Casey Kasem's American Top 40, his voice slipping in between the beats in my headphones. Mom always kept it on while she cooked or folded laundry. The week before, Rapture by Blondie had been in the top 5, and I'd spent 2 nights straight trying to memorize the rap part, just to make my sister roll her eyes. But right then, my world was narrowed to the click of the Walkman's rewind button, the steady whir of the tapes. We were supposed to have baseball practice at Miller Park that day. Not the nice field on the other side of town where the high school team played, but the beat-up one tucked behind the old Montgomery ward. You couldn't miss it. The chain-link fence behind home plate had a perfect diamond-shaped hole big enough for a baseball to pass through, and right field faded into a stretch of patchy grass that gave up entirely after about 20 feet, turning into bare, dusty dirt. Every spring, the Parks Department promised to fix it. Every spring, nothing happened. Coach Phelps, who looked like he'd stepped right out of a 1973 Sears menswear catalog, was always late. So we filled the time the way any group of 8th graders did in 1981, tossing the ball around, chewing big league chew until our jaws ached, swapping exaggerated stories about Atari 2600 scores. I remember Billy Harper bragging that he'd reached the kill screen on Pac-Man at the Goldmine arcade in the mall. Nobody believed him, but we all acted impressed anyway because Billy was the kind of guy who'd make your life miserable if you didn't. I had my Walkman with me tucked in the side pocket of my old blue gym bag. Rookie mistake, I guess. But back then, having a Walkman was like carrying a Corvette in your pocket. And not just any Corvette, but one with a paint job that screamed, "Look at me." The yellow Sony Sport stood out even in the dim dugout. I'd saved a fresh set of Duracells just for that afternoon. The foam ear pads still smelled faintly of the lemon-scented cleaner I used to keep them from getting sweaty. It wasn't like I flaunted it. Okay, maybe a little. But you have to understand, music was currency. You couldn't just pull a phone out of your pocket and have any song in the world. You had what you owned or what you taped off the radio when the DJ didn't talk over the intro. And if you were lucky enough to have a tape player you could carry with you, you were practically royalty. That day, the air was warm in that clingy way that made your shirt stick to your back. The sun had that late afternoon slant, turning everything golden except the deep shadows under the bleachers where kids sometimes hid to smoke. You could smell fresh-cut grass from the football field 2 blocks over, mixed with the faint gasoline tang from the go-kart track by the bowling alley. I remember leaning against the dugout wall, mitt tucked under one arm, listening to Hold On Loosely by 38 Special through the Walkman while Ricky Palmer tried to teach Joey Barrett how to throw a curveball. Ricky's '78 Camaro was parked just beyond left field, and he'd left the windows down so his Pioneer speakers could blast Urgent by Foreigner at anyone within half a mile. It was one of those moments where nothing seemed wrong. Nothing seemed like it could go wrong. My gym bag sat on the bench inside the dugout. The zipper was open just enough to let the headphone cord peek out, like it was smiling at me. I figured everyone knew it was mine. I'd written "Property of Kevin M." inside the battery cover with masking tape, for crying out loud. If I had even an ounce of suspicion, it was only the good kind. The kind where you think maybe someone will ask to borrow it for a song or two, then hand it right back. But the truth is, I wasn't thinking about trust or theft or anything heavier than whether I'd get home in time to catch that night's episode of Heart to Heart before my dad claimed the TV for MASH. If I'd known how the rest of that afternoon was going to play out, I might have kept the Walkman in my pocket. But then again, I was 14. And at 14, you think you're the main character in a movie where nothing bad can really happen until the music swells. Back home that week, life was running on its usual rhythm, which in our house meant a constant mix of noise, smells, and interruptions. The kind of background chaos you don't even notice until you grow up and realize you miss it. Dad's after-work routine never changed. He'd come through the door with his tie already loosened, kick off his shoes in the front hall, and head straight for the kitchen. You could hear the clink of ice cubes falling into his glass before he even said hello. The bottle of Seagrams sat on the counter next to a sweating 2-liter of ginger ale, and by the time he was settled into his chair, the 6 o'clock news theme was already playing on our old Zenith console TV, the one with the wood paneling and the channel knob that clicked like a safe lock. Meanwhile, my little sister Emily had claimed the living room rug as her kingdom. She'd spread out her Barbie dream house, the one with the elevator you worked by pulling a string, and was staging elaborate soap opera scenes I wasn't allowed to mess up. In the corner, the family's avocado green rotary phone sat on its little table with the lace doily. Whenever it rang, Mom would holler from the kitchen for someone to get that before it stops, and we'd race to see who could pick it up first. Mom had been on a cooking experiment kick lately. That week she'd tried Jell-O 1, 2, 3 again, even though every time she made it, the layers slid together into a sad, pinkish blob. She swore she was following the instructions exactly, but our fridge looked like it was hiding some Cold War chemistry project. Alongside that, she'd stocked up on frozen Swanson TV dinners for the busy nights when she didn't feel like cooking from scratch. My favorite was the fried chicken one, though half the time the brownie in the foil tray came out as a rock-hard hockey puck. In my room, the Walkman had become more than just a music player. It was part of my evening ritual. I'd sprawl out on the orange shag carpet with my back against the bed, untangle the headphone cord with the care of a jeweler working on a necklace, flip the cassette, and let the music take over. The foam ear pads pressed lightly against my temples, leaving little half-moon marks in my hair when I took them off. The Sears catalog stayed open on my desk, always to the electronics section. I'd trace my finger over the pictures of boomboxes with twin cassette decks, fantasizing about the day I could afford one big enough to annoy the entire neighborhood. The page corners were curled from being turned so often. That Tuesday morning, before heading to practice, I'd been sprawled on my bed, thinking about whether to bring the Walkman along. Part of me thought it was risky, but another part figured, what's the harm? Everyone on the team knew it was mine. I'd even let a few of them listen in the past. No big deal. I slipped it into the side pocket of my blue gym bag, zipped it just halfway so I could grab it quickly if I wanted to. Tossed in my glove, my lucky batting glove with the Velcro half coming off and a pack of grape bubble yum. Didn't even think twice about it. Looking back now, I can still picture the bag sitting on the bench at the dugout. It wasn't just an object. It was like a little piece of my room out there in the open, surrounded by dust and chatter and the faint smell of old leather from everyone's mitts. I should have felt protective, but I didn't. I figured, who would be dumb enough to take something with my name written inside? I was mid-throw with Ricky Palmer when something felt off. You know that tiny itch in your brain? The one that starts before you even consciously know what's wrong? Yeah, that. My gym bag, the one I dumped on the bench inside the dugout without a second thought, suddenly looked smaller, lighter. Ricky lobbed the ball back to me, his Camaro keys jingling in his pocket with every step. Yo, Kev, you okay? You're looking at that bag like it just bit you. I tried to laugh it off, tossing the ball in the air and catching it. Nah, just making sure I didn't crush my headphones or something. But when I unzipped the pocket, the little rush of warm air that escaped hit me harder than it should have. Glove? Check. Crumpled water bottle? Check. Gum wrappers stuck to the inside lining? Double check. But no Walkman. I dug deeper, feeling around like maybe it had slipped under the mitt. My fingers brushed the masking tape label I'd stuck inside the battery cover, except it wasn't there. My stomach dropped, the way it did on that rickety old wooden roller coaster at Funland when it hit the first big dip. Hey, I called out louder than I meant to. Anybody see my Walkman? The responses were as predictable as they were useless. One kid shrugged. Another mumbled something about maybe I'd left it at home. Billy Harper, always the wise guy, smirked and said, maybe it walked away on its own. That's why they call it a Walkman, right? A couple of guys chuckled. But then, from the far end of the bench, Joey Barrett spoke up between bites of a Charleston chew. I saw it earlier when you were throwing with Ricky. The cord was hanging out of your bag. Looked pretty sweet. I was going to ask to listen, but he trailed off, his eyes darting to the far side of the field where a few guys were tossing the ball half-heartedly. And that's when the noise of the whole park seemed to turn up a notch. The crack of a bat hitting a ball echoed sharper. The rumble of traffic from Main Street, where the stoplight always stuck on yellow, sounded louder. I swear even the rusty chain on the flagpole clanged like it was trying to tell me, yeah, kid, welcome to the real world. I started walking the perimeter of the dugout, peeking under the bench, kicking at the dust, half hoping it had just fallen. My sneakers crunched over the scattered sunflower seed shells and the occasional crumpled big league chew wrapper. Nothing. Seriously, I said, turning back to the group. Did anyone touch my bag? My voice cracked, which was about the worst thing that could happen to a 14-year-old in front of his friends. More shrugs. One kid, I think it was Mark Dwyer, made a point of spitting on the ground and looking away, like even acknowledging me might get him dragged into something. And here's the thing. In that moment, I knew. It wasn't misplaced. It wasn't sitting at home on my bed, it was gone. Someone had taken it, and they were smart enough to know not to get caught with it right away. The practice fizzled out after that. Coach Phelps finally showed up, blew his whistle a couple of times, but I couldn't focus. My mitt felt heavier, the air thicker. Every time someone laughed, I wondered if it was about me. I remember walking home, dragging my bat along the chain-link fence just to hear the metallic ting-ting-ting follow me. The sun was dipping behind the Montgomery Ward sign, casting that long shadow over the parking lot where the Woolworth's delivery trucks used to park. My hands were sweating, but not from the heat. It's funny. Losing a thing can feel like losing more than the thing itself. That day it felt like someone had reached into my pocket and taken not just my music but my little escape hatch. And here's where I'll throw it to you. Did you ever lose something back then that wasn't just stuff, but part of who you were? 2 decades later, spring of 2001, I was back in town for Dad's retirement party. Same streets, same leaning telephone poles, even the same faded family hardware sign on Main, though the store itself had been closed for years. It was strange walking those sidewalks again. The cracks in the pavement were in the same places like they'd been waiting for me. The party was at the VFW hall, the one that still smelled faintly of beer-soaked carpet and cigarette smoke from the days before the ban. There were helium balloons tied to the chairs, sagging a little from the heat inside, and long folding tables lined with plastic tablecloths and trays of food, potato salad, baked ziti, cold cuts from O'Malley's Deli. A huge coffee urn hissed in the corner next to a stack of styrofoam cups, and someone had brought 2 store-bought cheesecakes still in their clear plastic domes. I was in line at the buffet when I heard a voice behind me, a voice I hadn't heard in 20 years but knew instantly. Kevin? Man, you look exactly the same. I turned, and there was Billy Harper. Same smirk, though softer now. The feathered hair was gone, replaced with a closely cropped cut flecked with gray, but those eyes, they were still the eyes of the kid who'd hit a homer over the left field fence in 8th grade and strutted the bases like he was on This Week in Baseball. We shook hands, and I swear there was an instant time warp, like I was back in the dugout, the air smelling of leather mitts and dusty dirt. Billy, I said, laughing, I can't believe you're still around. He grinned. Still here, man. Never made it past the county line for long. We talked for a while. Who'd moved away, who'd passed on, who'd gotten divorced. And then, out of nowhere, he said, Hey, you remember that yellow Walkman you lost back in the day? I laughed. Yeah, that thing was my baby. I still think about it sometimes when I hear certain songs. Billy looked down at his paper plate, stabbed at the potato salad with his plastic fork, and said quietly, Yeah, so, I took it. I froze, thinking he was joking. Come on. No, I'm serious. He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for 20 years. I was broke. My folks were fighting all the time. Needed gas money to get to school. So I took it. Sold it to this guy over by the bowling alley for $20. I felt bad the second I walked away, but I never had the guts to tell you. The sound in the room dimmed for a second, like my ears were focusing only on his voice. I saw him not as the cocky shortstop from my memory, but as a kid, maybe scared, maybe just desperate. I didn't say anything for a moment. Part of me expected to feel angry, but instead, there was this odd calm, maybe because so much time had passed. Maybe because in that instant I understood things I hadn't at 14, that people make bad calls, that sometimes a moment of weakness shapes a memory for decades. I finally said, "Well, I guess you owed me a mixtape." He laughed, a real relieved laugh, and for the first time in years I did too. Later that night, after the speeches and the cake and the awkward small talk with people who remembered me as Little Kevin from Elm Street, I walked out to the parking lot with that strange heaviness you get when the past brushes up against you in real time. My '85 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, the one I'd nursed through more repairs than I could count, sat under the flickering sodium light. The paint was dull, the driver's seat had a tear the size of a paperback book, and the radio knobs were worn smooth from years of turning them by hand. But sliding into that seat felt like slipping on an old denim jacket, frayed in all the right places, still warm from the sun. On the drive back to Mom's house, I kept thinking about April 14th, 1981. About that moment, I unzipped my gym bag and realized my Walkman was gone. Back then, it had felt like someone had carved a hole right in the middle of my day. But now, after hearing the truth from Billy, the memory had shifted. The sharp edges were gone. In their place was something rounder, softer, like an old baseball, scuffed but still whole. I realized that losing the Walkman had been my first real lesson that things, even the ones you love and care for, can vanish without warning. But hearing Billy admit it 2 decades later was a reminder that sometimes the story doesn't end where you think it does. Sometimes, the full picture takes years to come into focus. I pulled up to the curb outside Mom's, cut the engine, and just sat there for a minute. The street was quiet except for the faint buzz of a streetlight and the distant sound of a dog barking. I closed my eyes and just for a second I could hear it again. The soft whir of the tape spools, the click when it stopped, the muffled voice of Casey Kasem counting down the hits. I could feel the foam ear pads pressing against my temples, smell the faint warm plastic of the Walkman, and see the sunlight spilling across the Montgomery Ward parking lot. When I finally got out of the car, I looked down the block and half expected to see Ricky's Camaro parked at the curb, Billy's laughter echoing from the dugout, and my 14-year-old self heading home with a gym bag slung over my shoulder, still believing that the only thing that mattered was the next song. Some memories don't fade, they just change color over time. And if you're lucky, they start to sound less like a loss, and more like a song you forgot you knew all the words to.